Hello everyone and welcome to not one but two games you guys requested over the course of the past few days. One of them was played I think 8 days ago, one of them 5 days ago, one against Hikaru Nakamura and one against Ian Nepomniachtchi. Really wonderful games and by none other than the great Rey Enigma. We still don't know who he is. For those of you who have never heard of Rey Enigma, it is, well, we don't know if, it's a man or a woman. It's an entity going around the world and playing chess against very strong players. He's played pretty much everyone. He's played the big three. He played Anatoly Karpov. He played Garry Kasparov. He played Magnus Carlsen. He played many local, chess players from Spain, as we think that he's from Spain, but could also be that he's not. He played Paco Vejo. He played David Anton. He played Pepe Cuenca. He played Miguel Ilescas. He played many strong players and also played Alexandra Kostenyuk and Judith Polgar. So we also know that he's not one of them. But yeah. He's just going around the world challenging very strong players, and now we'll see how he fares against Hikaru and then against Nepo. So let's check it out. Rey has the white pieces. I think he has the white pieces in all the games. Not really sure. I can't remember the one against Kasparov was also, but yeah, okay, doesn't matter. But the one against Hikaru and Nepo are both where Rey wields the white pieces. So let's see what happens. Rey opens with pawn to d4. Hikaru plays knight f6. We have a knight to f3. And as you haven't opened up the e-pawn just yet, Hikaru says, all right, we're going out of book right away. He plays pawn to b5. We have pawn to e3 and now pawn to a6. This is the so-called Polish variation of the Indian game. We have bishop to d3, bishop to b7, and knight b to d2. We have pawn to e6 and pawn to e4. You'd expect something like pawn to c3 and have some sort of a London system set up without the bishop on f4, but the immediate pawn to e4. And although the pawn definitely belongs on e4, it's a question or not whether this is now good or bad, or if it's a loss of a tempo. But okay, pawn to d6, and we have castles kingside. There is one game where pawn to c3 was played. Here castles kingside, and it is now as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. Knight b to d7. Hikaru prepares to bring the rook into the game, prepares pawn to c5. We have a4, and here Hikaru actually thought about the position a few seconds, and he played pawn to b4, which I thought was the most obvious reply. But then Rey also started thinking, and around this time they were pretty equal on time. Rey was even a little bit better. b4, we have rook to e1 and bishop to e7. We have pawn to e5, knight to d5 now, and knight to e4. Usually I'm used to seeing this particular pattern with a knight on c3, then you avoid the trade and go knight e4. But okay, the knight was on d2, so knight e4. We have pawn to h6 and knight to g3. We have d captures on e5, knight captures on e5, and knight 7 to f6. And well, believe it or not, here Rey has an incredible position, and Hikaru even recognized that. He said after the game that this was a really good position for Rey, that he misplayed it. What would you play here as white? Just just for fun. Take a few seconds. So the move that sort of screams to be played is knight to h5, as it activates all of your pieces and it comes with tempo. Now if you capture on h5, then the queen comes into the game, and then the famous bishop, knight, queen, and the rook combo that will enter the game, either via the e3 or the e4 square, will get the job done against the black king. But the question is, what if you just castle kingside? Well, if you castle kingside, then you sacrifice everything and you checkmate the black king. Look at this. Knight captures on g7, king captures, bishop captures on h6, king captures, and queen to c1 check is deadly. Well, the bishop covers these two squares, so where are you going? If you go to h5, okay, then it's just going to be over very quickly. But if you go king g7, then queen to g5 check, king to h8, and now look at this. Queen h8 check, king to g8, and knight to g6, and there is no defense. Queen to h8 will be checkmate, or you play f captures, and then after king captures and king to h8, queen to h6 check, king to g8, and now finally rook to e5, threatening to bring the rook to g5 with check. And not a lot you can do here. Whatever you try will be insufficient. You could sort of move the knight to gain control over this square, but what do you do? If you play something like this, then queen h7 is just checkmate. That knight has to be there to guard h7. So you could play something like knight f4 to maybe try and get black off of the right path, or rather white, but then just rook g5 check, and after king f7, bishop to g6 check, king has to go back, and now bishop to e8 with check. Knight has to block, knight g6, and rook captures on g6 will be checkmate. So this is only one of the lines that could happen after this knight to h5 move. But also what's incredibly tricky is that after this, well, knight 7 to f6, knight h5 wasn't played, bishop to d2 was played. But it's interesting if knight h5, king to f8, and I think this is why Rey maybe decided against it. After king f8, it's still a game, and although, yeah, okay, black is looking a little bit weird, this rook will have to wait for a very long time to get into the game. It's not, you know, amongst engines, maybe yes, it's lost for black, but against humans, against Hikaru, yeah, it's definitely not. So he decides to wait. He plays bishop to d2, we have castles kingside, and now it's perfectly fine. Now you don't have any of the fancy sacrifices. Pawn to c4, we have b captures en passant, b captures and pawn to c5. Hikaru finally breaks through and attacks the center. Rook to b1 and rook to b8. We have queen to e2, and now putting pressure on that a6 pawn. And although it's, you know, it definitely makes sense, here queen to c1 really, again, makes it hard for Hikaru to defend. Pretty much whatever Hikaru plays, you play bishop captures on h6 on the next move, and very difficult to defend. So I think Rey respecting Hikaru too much here, and just doesn't play what I guess he or she would usually play. We have queen to e2, c captures on d4, c captures and pawn to a5. And here both were down to around 1 minute 50 seconds, and it's an equal position, so crazy stuff ahead. We have rook e to c1, knight to b4, and this rook to c1, again, rook to b5 was the better idea, just putting pressure on that a5 pawn. This way Hikaru recognizes it and he plays knight to b4, stopping rook to b5, getting the knight into the game, and slowly but surely taking over. We have bishop to b5, queen captures on d4, Hikaru grabs the pawn, bishop captures on b4, bishop captures on b4, and now knight to c6, offering a trade. But it is the only thing that makes sense, as there is a fork involved. We have captures on c6, rook captures on c6, and knight to d5. We have rook to d1, queen to f4, and rook to c4. Now attacks the queen, queen to g5, and here both of them were already below the 30-second mark, so they have to make moves quickly. Queen to e7, we have rook d to c1, and rook f to d8. We have pawn to h3, queen to f8, and queen to f3, rook b to c8, and knight to g3. Here Hikaru said that even though, okay, maybe, you know, opening-wise, he does not have the strength of a classical 2700 player, but when it comes to blitz, when it comes to making moves with mere seconds on the clock, here you can definitely see that we are dealing with a very strong player. And also it kind of, you know, breaks the question whether if someone told us who Rey Enigma was, would we even know? Because he could be like a 2400 player, maybe even a 2300 classical player, maybe even a 2100 classical player that just never really played classical tournaments, and you know, he just plays blitz and bullet all day, every day, and he's like, he mentioned that he was all like 2870 on blitz and chess.com. So yeah. Could be that we actually have no idea who it is. We have rook captures on c4, rook captures, we have knight to f6 and knight to e4, knight captures on e4, queen captures, and queen to d6. And okay, maybe, you know, again, objectively it is equal, but bishops are of opposite color. Hikaru has the control over the d file. This is not something that you would just say that, yeah, that's let's call it a draw here. So no, this gets played on when there are bishops of opposite color. They ignore each other, so if you attack with the bishop, your opponent is defending a piece down. We have pawn to g3, pawn to g6, king to g2, and pawn to h5. Pawn to h4 and queen to d2. So pretty much all of the moves that you and your uncle would play. We have rook to c7 and queen to d5, offering a queen trade. Queen captures, we have rook captures on d5, and now bishop to e8, going after the f7 pawn, as now you can capture it. So Hikaru defends, rook to f5, and bishop back to b5. Waiting for Hikaru to make a move, and I think considering that he is a pawn down and the bishops are of opposite color, he was definitely ready to repeat moving the bishop back and forth. So king to g7, we have pawn to f4, rook to d5. Hikaru now again allows the attack against the f7 pawn. Bishop to e8, we have rook to f5 and bishop to b5. We have king to f8 and king to f3. Bishop to d6, attacking the rook, and rook to c8 with check. We have king g7, rook to c6, and rook to d5. We have king to e4, not really doing all that much, but, it's nice to have a centralized king. Bishop to b4 and bishop to c4, attacking the rook, and rook to d2. And all of a sudden, Hikaru now gains a much better position, and after rook to c7, Hikaru is even completely winning, but they had seconds on the clock, whereas you guys, you have an entire day in front of you, your entire lives. What would you play here? To win this with black, what do you play here? So the only move that wins, and it wins on the spot, is rook c2. Because the rook is on such an awkward square, the bishop also, you can't move it as the rook is on c7. And whatever you play, it simply doesn't matter. For example, king d3, you're going to deliver a check. And now after king to e2, you don't capture the g3 pawn right away, because there's also bishop captures on e6. The f7 pawn would be pinned. But you can simply play king f6. And now you're threatening to capture on g3, and if king f2, rook c2 check, king to f1, rook c1 check, king to g2, or wherever, doesn't really matter, bishop to e1, and now you're going to use the dark squares, you're going to start eliminating the pawns on the king side, and that's it. There's nothing white can do, white is just too slow, and that's pretty much it. If you move the rook to be on a light square, you no longer have a pressure on f7, and you cannot play bishop to b5, bishop to e8, because the rook is on a dark square. So rook to c2 is just an amazing move here, but like I said, they were down to seconds on the clock. After rook to c7, Hikaru went in with the king to f6, which is a move that he will need. We already discussed it due to this threat. But now after king to f6, you have to play bishop to b5 and go after the pawn this way. Here, Rey played king to e3, and now Hikaru is again completely winning, and he plays rook to c2. King d3, rook to c3 check, king to d4, rook captures on g3, and now it's just a matter of technique. But I don't think they were, trying to make precise moves. Even though they were making them, they were just making, trying to not lose on time, as they were playing 3 minutes without increment. We have rook to c6, bishop to c3, with check, king to e4, and now king to e7. We have pawn to f5. Freeing up the f4 square for the king, trying something. I don't think that was actually the case. I think that pawn was the closest to his finger, so he can make the move the quickest, as I think they were already below like 2 seconds or something like that. So g captures, king to f4, rook to h3, we have king to g5, and bishop to d2 with check. Again, if you don't see it's check and you play something else, you're going to lose the game. King captures on h5, bishop to e1, and now threatening rook captures on h4. King to h6 was played, king to f6, Hikaru boxing the white king in, threatening rook captures with checkmate. So king h7 captures, king to g8, bishop to b4, now even cutting off the king from going to f8, and bishop to e2. We have rook to g4 check, king to h8, and here Hikaru even offered the rook, but I think it was just faster to move the king than to capture the rook, so that's why Rey did it. But rook h4, and it was in this position on move 64. Very chess-like. I know that Rey Enigma lost on time, but he was also dead lost position-wise. So after king to g8, the best, the simplest way to play this would be to, well, get your rook able to maybe deliver a check, but also just after any move that white makes, let's say bishop to b5, you try to go after the f7 pawn, you'll go rook g3 check, and after king h7, pawn to f4. And now white is definitely too slow. The advancement of the f pawn is what decides the game. You're up 2 pawns, so it doesn't matter that the bishops are of opposite color. You have 3 pawns, in a cluster, you will win this very, very easily. The white king is completely cut off the game. So, there will be checkmating threats. So this is not, it doesn't matter that Hikaru won on time. He was also completely winning. So after the game, Rey asked Hikaru, what he thought his rating was, and Hikaru said obviously he is not, a very good classical player, and maybe just not that strong, maybe 2450. I think, I have no idea. I would say even less. But that he's obviously incredibly strong, and then Rey said that he was like 2870 on chess.com. But now comes the game that you guys requested even more, and that is the game against Ian Nepomniachtchi that Rey Enigma also played. This one is of a very different nature, so let's check it out. And also Hikaru said that what he thinks that Rey should do, and I think that was, Rey only plays these incredibly strong players, so I guess he's already used to it, but that he should be more aggressive, and then that he would have better results, that he had a better position against Hikaru, that he just didn't take advantage of it. So let's see what he does against Nepo, as we are talking about a very, very similar thing here. So pawn to d4, knight to f6, we have knight f3, pawn to e6, pawn to e3, pawn to c5, and bishop to d3. We have bishop to e7, and both players castle kingside. So castles, pawn to c3, and pawn to b6. Nepo wants the fianchetto, the light square bishop, via the b7 square. We have pawn to e4. Again, Rey with the e3, e4 maneuver. We have pawn to d5 and pawn to e5. And now there is a game where knight to e4 was played. Here we have knight d7, knight fd7, and it is now as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. So, okay, rook e1, we have pawn to a5. Nepo wants to start playing on the queen side. Knight b to d2, we have bishop to a6 and bishop back to c2. Rey avoids the trade of bishops, as this bishop is incredibly strong and incredibly important. With the advancement of the f-pawn, the knight is no longer on f6, so that king is, somewhat weak, definitely. We have knight to c6, pawn to a3, and pawn to b5. Nepo says, all right, you do what you want on the king side. I'm playing on the queen side and in the center. Knight to f1, remaneuvering the knight to g3, b4, we have knight to g3, and Nepo plays b captures on c3. We have b captures, queen to c7, and pawn to h4, going after the black king. And this is, what I always say, defending against ghosts is what makes them real. There is no threat here. There is no attack. It will maybe develop over time and you will be able to react to it. But here, Nepo defends against the ghosts and he plays pawn to h6. From no target, he gives his opponent the target. And even though it doesn't seem like there's a clear way of taking advantage of this, ghost, there actually is. It would be better to just continue developing, but okay, it's a 3-minute blitz game. Nepo plays pawn to h6, and now what do you think Rey played here? It doesn't look like it's there, but it's there. He played bishop captures on h6. And if there was like a bishop on e3 and the queen on d2, you would play that immediately. There's no doubt about that. It's bishop for 2 pawns plus all of these pieces going after the black king. You would play it instantly. But here, it's good that Rey slowed down and he decided to do it, because a player like Nepo, he wouldn't miss something like this. But here, I think he didn't miss it. He didn't even calculate it. He just thought, I'm Nepo, and there's no way there's anything there. And there was. So bishop captures, g captures, and just queen d2, preparing to bring the queen into the game. Pawn to f6, he wants to free up his queen and the rest of the pieces, and now queen captures on h6. You could also maybe try to defend it, but how are you defending it? If you play king to g7, then you run into this nasty knight h5 check, and what do you play? King g8, queen captures on h6, and you're getting checkmated, or you're getting checkmated here. It doesn't really matter. So that's why Nepo played pawn to f6. We have queen captures on h6, and now rook to f7. we have bishop to g6, and Nepo goes knight to f8. He says, please take my rook, I want to get my pieces into the game. Bishop captures, king captures, and now e captures on f6. Bishop captures on f6, and now knight to g5 with check. Bishop captures, we have h captures, and now bishop back to d3. So, okay, Nepo got his pieces into the game somewhat, but still very, very hard. The king is wide in the open. The rook has to go into the game. The knights are very, very awkwardly placed. It is objectively lost. Whether Nepo can save it or not, let's see. Knight h5, we have queen to e7, and rook to e3. Beautiful move, comes with tempo, so of course you play it. We have bishop to f5, rook to f3. The other way, of course, is rook to e1, but you can play rook to f3 and then rook to e1. So, you know, depending on how you want to play it. Nepo starts running, and now rook to e1. The threat being rook captures on f5, as the e-pawn is obviously pinned. Bishop to e4, and now just knight to... Here, Nepo even played bishop to e4, and he, retracted the move, and then after, some 15 seconds, he played it again. But, you don't have a better move, so you might as well play it. Knight to f6 with check, king to d8, knight captures on e4. You could also not play, knight to f6 check. You could also just capture on f8 and then capture on e6, and then also the knight on c6 falls. But this is much cleaner. So king to d8, knight captures on e4. We have knight to d7. You cannot capture the knight as this knight on f8 is hanging. So knight to d7, and now knight captures on c5. We have knight captures, pawn captures, and king to d7. Queen to g6, trying to trap the queen. We have knight to d8, defending on f7. And now Rey shows us just what an amazing attacker he is by giving up unnecessary pawns. Pawn to c6 check, king captures, and pawn to c4, and that's it. You either capture and you open up the path towards your king, or you don't, and the same will happen. So queen d6, Nepo decided not to. C captures, queen captures, and now rook to c3 with check, king to b6, and rook to b1 with check, king to a6. And now there are many ways you can win this. One is particularly clean and the fastest. It's actually a mate in 8, but there will be a lot of unnecessary defensive moves that black has to make, so it's even less, I would say. But yeah, what would you play here? Just, finish the game instantly. The move Nepo played, the move Rey played is queen to c2. That is the move. The threat is queen to e2 check, and there is nothing you can do about that. If you try something like, let's say, pawn to e5 to maybe counter the white queen's check along this diagonal, again, it doesn't matter. Just queen e2 check, king to a7, and after queen e3 check and queen d4, you don't care. Rook to c7 check, king to a6. Now again, queen e2 check. The king cannot go to the 7th rank. And after queen d3 or queen c4, you will again win that black queen. So Nepo tried something else after queen c2. He played knight to b7. And now we have rook to c7. Rook to b8, defending on b7. We have queen to e2 with check, king to a7, and now queen to e3 check, king to a8, and queen to b6. There's nothing that Nepo can do. His pieces are completely tied down. The threat is queen to a6 checkmate, and there's no way to stop this. Nepo played queen to d3. Okay, you defend a6, but now you are no longer defending the knight. Rey played rook captures on b7, and he was in this position on move 44 that Ian Nepomniachtchi resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. There are many mate threats like queen to a7 check, rook captures on b8 check. There's no way to stop checkmate. You're down a full rook. There's no way to even prolong the game. You can play something silly like queen captures on b1, but that's a PogChamp's move. So, of course, Nepo will not play that. So, brilliant stuff by Rey, and okay, Nepo was very, very polite after the game. He wasn't, mad that he lost or anything, and he praised Rey. He even said that obviously he's a stronger player than him. But like I said, we don't know. We know some of the players who he isn't. None of the strong local players or any of the top grandmasters in the world. And I'm told, he uses a voice modulator, so yeah, we can't even know how he sounds. So yeah, could be literally anyone. I don't think we will ever find out, or maybe we will. I don't know. So yeah, that's the game, or rather those were the games. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Magician Chess, Sandral No Last, E1 Check, Only Bullet, Random Pawn for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, such as these 2 games, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.